Hello, everyone. I have a guest today that I've wanted to talk to for a long time, Dr. Victor Davis Hanson. He is the Martin and Illy Anderson Senior Fellow at the Hoover Institution. With his focus in the classics and military history, he's an accomplished academic, professor, and author. He's taught at Stanford, Hillsdale College, the U.S. Naval Academy, and Pepperdine University. His books, many of them, 26 I believe, include The Second World Wars, The End of Sparta, The Soul of Battle, Carnage and Culture, and The Case for Trump in 2019. But I think we'll start today with a discussion about citizenship. I'll just make a couple of comments. You know, one of the things I've noticed over the last, I suppose the span of my life really, is that during my lifetime, the word citizenship citizen seemed to be replaced by the word consumer, which I always thought was a bad replacement, given that citizen has this, it's got a stalwart and traditional and dignified connotation that the word consumer seems to lack entirely. Well, you wrote a whole book about citizenship recently, and so I thought we might weave our way through that. And you contrast citizens with pre-citizens. The book, by the way, is called The Dying Citizen: How Progressive Elites, Tribalism, and Globalism are Destroying the Idea of America. And you start that book off, well, first of all, decrying that destruction, but also contrasting the modern idea of citizenship, of citizen, with the pre-modern idea of, say, peasant or resident or tribe. And so let's delve into that a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, the idea of citizenship's pretty recent in the long history of civilization. It appeared somewhere around 700 BC in rural Greece and swept pretty quickly. And so by the 5th century, there were 1,500 city-states. And what it was the first time that citizens were self-governing, and that meant that they were pretty clearly defined. They made up their own militias. They adjudicated the circumstances under which they would go to war. They voted for their own officials. And more importantly, they had property rights. They could pass on property. I think that was the catalyst for citizenship, the right of inheritance, that the state couldn't expropriate or own property from the individual. And then that long odyssey brought us to, of course, the founding of the United States, and there were clear distinctions between a resident that happened to live in the United States and a citizen. A citizen alone could vote. A citizen alone could hold office. A citizen alone could leave the boundaries and come back into the United States on his own volition. A citizen alone was eligible for federal services, or in most states, and a citizen served in the military. I don't think any of those still apply, those distinctions between a resident and a citizen, with the exception of holding office, and that's under assault. I know here in California, people who are not just non-citizens, but here illegally can vote, say, in a Berkeley school board election. And now there's efforts to make sure that people can run for office who are not citizens. Non-citizens serve in the military. Non-citizens actually can go across the border with greater facility than you or I could probably. And so we are a nation, we've never had this before, of 50 million people in the United States that were born in a foreign country of different statuses. Some are legal residents, some are illegal residents, some are citizens. Some are migrants back and forth, and that's the highest in actual numbers and in percentages of the population. And unfortunately, it comes at a time when we, the hosts, have lost confidence in the traditional melting pot of assimilation, integration, intermarriage. And so we're starting to revert to a pre-civilizational tribalism. I think large swaths of the United States are tribal now.
Okay, so let's start approaching that anthropologically and psychologically. So 600 BC, something like that, you seem to get something like a transformation of the idea of the tribe, which actually wouldn't have been an idea, right? A tribe isn't an idea. A tribe is a natural offshoot of our primate heritage. That's a good way of thinking about it. And a tribe would have been something like an extended kin group, and that was bound together by our our primate social biology somewhat akin to a chimpanzee troop or maybe a bonobo troop. And then as we became more capable of abstract formalization, that idea of, or that reality of tribal membership got transmuted into something that actually had statable properties. And that would be the idea of a citizen. And so you get a layer of abstraction on top of that that starts to lay out technically and explicitly what it means to be the member of a group. And then along with that, you get a set of rights and responsibilities that are associated with that group, but also the possibility of both expanded and limited membership that's also formalized. And so as the Greeks did with so many things, they took something that was part and parcel of our biological proclivity, so that proclivity for kinship and tribalism, and turned it into an explicit philosophical notion. And out of that, I suppose, developed both the idea of intrinsic human rights and human responsibilities. And that was all tied up in the notion of citizenship. And even now, when you hear people talk about citizenship, they concentrate a lot more about the rights than on the responsibilities.
They do. The big breakthrough was that a person replaced their primary allegiance to either someone that had blood ties or looked like them or the same locale, and they transferred that to an abstraction of the state. And what that meant was, for the first time, there was an embryonic sense of meritocracy. And you can really see it today. I've traveled almost, I think, to every Middle East country except Iran, and I'm always curious when I was in Libya or Egypt or Tunisia, why they don't work, even given some countries have enormous natural resources. And I always would hear a refrain, well, we hire our first cousin, or we hire our second cousin, that there is still a tribal loyalty. And what's tragic about the United States is that meritocracy and that what became a multiracial, multi-religious body politic was united by a primary allegiance to the idea of America, where people, where they enriched America with their food or their fashion or their art or their music, and that made American culturally rich, but they didn't import Mexican ideas of constitutional government such as they were, or they didn't bring in Russian ideas of individual liberty. They didn't touch the core, and that core united us. And now we can see that that's no longer true, that people are re-tribalizing and they're starting to identify with either their kin group or their ethnic group or their religious group. And what's scary now in the United States is that we've seen when you have a geographical force multiplier, and we're starting to see that with red-blue migration, it's sort of analogous to what happened in the 1850s, where there was a Mason-Dixon line, so to speak, of a very different culture that bifurcated from the North. And if this continues, I think we're going to see a sort of a traditionalist America that claims that it follows the founding principles in red states of limited government, less regulation, small taxation, and the idea of a citizen giving up their primary allegiance to the state, versus the blue state model, California, Illinois, New York, in which a number of identity politics groups or special interest groups all lobby for influence. And you can see what happens in the LA City Council hot mic scene, where all of these Latino council people got caught on a hot mic, where they were explicitly defining the new idea of a citizen, and that was that their primary identity group was at war with people from Oaxaca, it was at war with blacks, it was at war with gays, and they were angry because of their representation was not demographically proportional to their numbers in the population, so they said. And I think that was a future for the country, and it's what's going on in California in the present.
Yeah, so you worry about what you might describe as a reversion to this more implicit tribalism that's predicated on, well, it'd be predicated on religious identity or skin color or linguistic identity or perhaps shared philosophical identity, although that would be rarer, and that's the counterposition to this more abstracted notion of citizenship. So let's delve into that for a minute, because I think we could lay forth the proposition that